Time does not pass evenly across the skin of our world. In certain places, it pools and gathers like shadow in a valley. It thickens like honey in the veins of stone. It remembers. Scattered across our planet's face are monuments that defy simple understanding, temples whose walls whisper equations we still struggle to solve, labyrinths that map not only space but consciousness, stone circles that capture stars in their geometry. These places are wounds in our certainty. They are questions etched in granite and limestone, in cliff face and cavern, in desert floor and mountaintop. They persist beyond their maker's intentions, becoming something stranger with each passing century. The archaeologist's trowel uncovers not answers but deeper riddles. The astronomer's calculations reveal not coincidence but design. The geologist's hammer strikes not rock but resonance. And in these convergences of wonder and science, we find ourselves returning to the same sites, these 22 ancient places, year after year, theory after theory, generation after generation. They haunt us, these stone sentinels and buried cities. They haunt even the experts who have spent lifetimes studying their shadows. For in their silence, they speak a truth we struggle to translate, that perhaps we have never been alone in our questioning of the stars, and that the past is not a foreign country but a mirror, reflecting back our own bewildered eyes. Main site or subject description. These 22 sites form a constellation across our planet, points of wonder connected by the thin threads of human curiosity. Some rise from desert sands, others hide beneath mountain shadows or jungle canopies. Some have stood in plain sight for millennia, others were discovered only after the Earth reluctantly surrendered its secrets. Together, they compose a global puzzle that defies both time and conventional explanation. 1. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, rising from the dusty Anatolian plateau, its circular enclosures of massive T-shaped pillars were deliberately buried around 8000 BCE, after standing for perhaps 2 millennia. Carved beasts prowl across stone surfaces created before pottery, before writing, before settled agriculture took root in human society. Each monolith weighs tons, each carving speaks a language of symbols we have yet to decipher. 2. The Great Pyramid of Giza, Egypt, the last survivor of the ancient wonders stands with mathematical precision on the Giza Plateau. Its 2.3 million stones, averaging 2.5 tons each, align to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. Within its passages and chambers lies a geometry that encodes the dimensions of our planet and, some suggest, a knowledge of star patterns that should have been beyond the reach of ancient minds. 3. Puma Punku, Bolivia, high in the Andean Altiplano, at an altitude where the air thins and the mind expands, lie megalithic blocks of andesite and granite cut with such precision that modern engineers still debate the methods used. H-shaped blocks and interlocking stones form a puzzle of technological achievement at odds with conventional understanding of pre-Columbian capabilities. 4. Nazca lines, Peru, etched into the desert floor, visible only from above, these geoglyphs depict creatures both real and imagined across a canvas of earth stretching more than 50 miles. A hummingbird with outstretched wings. A monkey with a spiral tail. A spider whose legs align with the direction of the rising sun on the winter solstice. The Nazca created a gallery meant for eyes that could soar. 5. Baalbek, Lebanon, the Temple of Jupiter rests upon a foundation of the largest worked stones in the world. The famous trilithon includes 3 stones weighing approximately 800 tons each. Beneath this Roman temple lies an older, more mysterious foundation whose purpose and builders remain shrouded in uncertainty. Nearby in the quarry lies the stone of the pregnant woman and the even larger Hajar al-Hibla, monoliths so massive they were abandoned before transportation. 6. Mohenjo-daro, Pakistan. This ancient Indus Valley city boasted sophisticated urban planning and sanitation systems over 4,000 years ago, yet shows evidence of a sudden abandonment. Among its mysteries, skeletons lying in streets, suggestions of radiation or intense heat, and small artifacts that some interpret as evidence of advanced technological knowledge. 7. Easter Island, Rapa Nui, nearly 1,000 monolithic human figures, the Moai, watch over this remote Pacific island, their backs to the sea, their eyes once inlaid with coral. The average Moai stands 13 feet tall and weighs 14 tons, the largest unfinished Moai would have stood 72 feet tall and weighed approximately 270 tons. A culture that deforested its island home somehow found the resources to quarry, carve, and transport these sentinels across difficult terrain. 8. Sacsayhuamán, Peru, overlooking Cusco, the ancient capital of the Inca Empire, stands a walled complex of massive limestone blocks fitted together without mortar. Some stones weigh more than 100 tons and contain up to 12 angles, interlocking with their neighbors with such precision that not even a knife blade can be inserted between them. The precision of this megalithic jigsaw puzzle defies simple explanation. 9. The Antikythera mechanism, Greece, retrieved from an ancient shipwreck. This corroded bronze device contained at least 30 gears arranged in a precision that would not be seen again until the development of astronomical clocks in medieval Europe, except this was created around 100 BCE. It predicted astronomical positions, eclipses, and the timing of ancient games with extraordinary accuracy. 10. The Baghdad Battery, Iraq, dating to the Parthian period, 250 BCE, 224 CE, these clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods could have produced an electric current when filled with an acidic solution. The purpose of such a device in ancient Mesopotamia remains elusive, challenging our understanding of early electrical knowledge. 11. Derinkuyu Underground City, Turkey, carved into the soft volcanic rock of Cappadocia, this underground metropolis descends at least 18 levels below the surface, with room for 20,000 people, livestock, food stores, and wine presses. Massive stone doors could seal off each level from the inside, while thousands of ventilation shafts provided air to the depths. The entire complex speaks of a fear that drove an entire civilization downward. 12. Nan Madol, Micronesia, built upon a coral reef, this Venice of the Pacific. Consists of 92 artificial islets created from prismatic basalt columns, some weighing up to 50 tons. With no draft animals or metal tools available to its Sotaler dynasty builders, the construction methods remain a source of speculation and legend. 13. The Longyou Caves, China, discovered only in 1992, these immense artificial caverns were carved through solid siltstone, leaving behind perfectly smooth walls adorned with systematic patterns of chisel marks. The 24 known grottos would have required the removal of nearly 1 million cubic meters of rock, yet no historical record of their construction exists. 14. Newgrange, Ireland, this massive circular mound, older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids, contains a passage aligned so precisely that at dawn on the winter solstice, a shaft of sunlight illuminates the central chamber for just 17 minutes. The engineering required to maintain this alignment for over 5,000 years speaks of an astronomical precision we are still working to understand. 15. The Serpent Mound, United States, stretching 1,348 feet along a plateau in Ohio, this earthwork effigy of a serpent uncoiling depicts not just an animal but a cosmology. Its curves align with the solstices and equinoxes, while the serpent's head aligns with the sunset on the summer solstice. Built by ancient indigenous peoples, it speaks of a sophisticated understanding of celestial cycles. 16. Yonaguni Monument, Japan. Submerged off the coast of Japan's westernmost island lies a structure that either represents one of the oldest architectural achievements known to humanity or one of nature's most remarkable geological formations. Terrace structures, straight edges, and carved steps beneath the waves continue to divide expert opinion. 17. The Stone Spheres of Costa Rica, over 300 perfectly worked stone spheres, some weighing up to 16 tons, lie scattered throughout the Diquis Delta. Created with a precision that achieved near-perfect roundness without modern tools, their purpose remains unknown, though their alignment suggests astronomical significance. 18. The Osirian at Abydos, Egypt, buried beneath the Temple of Seti I lies an enigmatic structure built with massive unadorned granite blocks in a style dramatically different from the temple above it. Its construction techniques and style suggest a much earlier origin than the New Kingdom structure it supports, challenging the established chronology. 19. The Newark Earthworks, United States, once covering more than 4 square miles, these geometric enclosures created by the Hopewell culture demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of geometry and astronomy. The Great Circle and Octagon complex aligns with the 18.6-year lunar cycle with a precision that still astonishes astronomers. 20. Gunung Padang, Indonesia. Beneath a conventional megalithic site on Java Island, geomagnetic surveys have revealed what appear to be buried chambers and constructions potentially dating back 20,000 years, which would make it the oldest pyramid-like structure on Earth, though this dating remains highly controversial. 21. The Bosnian Pyramid, Bosnia and Herzegovina, either a natural formation or the largest and oldest pyramid in the world. This hill near Visoko has become the center of intense debate. Excavations have revealed what some interpret as artificial concrete blocks and an underground tunnel network, while most mainstream archaeologists maintain it is simply a natural geological formation. 22. The Cockno Stone, Scotland. This massive rock slab bears over 90 carved cup and ring marks, spirals, and mysterious patterns dating to 3000 BCE. Reburied for protection in 1965, it was briefly re-exposed in 2016, revealing a complex symbolic language whose meaning has been lost to time. These sites exist not merely as physical locations but as intellectual borderlands, places where what we know confronts what we suspect, where science meets wonder, where the past poses questions to the present. They are not united by culture or period, but by the shadow of mystery they cast across our understanding. Mainstream historical understanding. Archaeological consensus provides frameworks for understanding these sites, even as questions linger at their edges. These explanations rest on foundations of excavation, carbon dating, artifact analysis, and historical context, the methodical work of generations of researchers whose trowels and brushes have carefully revealed what time concealed. Göbekli Tepe, while revolutionary in its antiquity, is understood as a ceremonial center created by hunter-gatherers who had not yet fully embraced agriculture. Its sophisticated stonework suggests that complex religious or social organization preceded settled farming communities, inverting the traditional narrative of human development. The Great Pyramid, according to mainstream Egyptology, was built during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu around 2560 BCE, using a workforce of skilled laborers rather than slaves. Ramps, levers, and copper tools, combined with remarkable organizational capacity and mathematical knowledge, explain its construction, though debates continue about the specific techniques employed. The Nazca lines are generally attributed to the Nazca culture between 500 BCE and 500 CE. Created by removing the reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles that cover the desert surface to reveal the lighter-colored earth beneath, they were likely religious in nature, possibly related to water sources or astronomical observations. Mohenjo-daro represents the height of the Indus Valley Civilization, which flourished between 3300 and 1300 BCE with sophisticated urban planning. Its decline coincides with climate change, shifting river patterns, and the arrival of Indo-Aryan peoples, natural processes rather than catastrophic events. The Moai of Easter Island were carved and transported by Polynesian settlers between 1250 and 1500 CE using wooden sledges, rollers, and ropes. Their creation contributed to the deforestation of the island, leading to resource depletion and societal collapse, a cautionary tale of environmental mismanagement. Sacsayhuamán's precise stonework is attributed to Inca engineers who worked stone using hammer stones of harder material, carefully shaping blocks at the quarry before transportation. The tight fit was achieved by rubbing stones together with abrasive sand between them, labor-intensive but within the capabilities of a civilization that could mobilize thousands of workers. The Antikythera mechanism, while sophisticated, builds upon the astronomical knowledge of ancient Greece. Its complexity reflects the mathematical understanding described in texts by scholars like Archimedes and Hipparchus, translated into mechanical form by skilled craftsmen who understood the mathematical principles of gear ratios. The so-called Baghdad battery may have been used for electroplating gold onto silver objects or for medical purposes such as pain relief, though some archaeologists argue it may simply have been a storage vessel with the iron rod used to secure a papyrus scroll. Each site has its orthodox explanation, a narrative built from evidence and comparative analysis, from the accumulation of data points and contextual understanding. These explanations avoid speculation about lost advanced civilizations or extraterrestrial intervention, focusing instead on the ingenuity of our ancestors within the technological constraints of their times. Yet even within these mainstream frameworks, questions remain, anomalies that don't quite fit, timelines that seem compressed, capabilities that stretch credibility. It is in these gaps that wonder persists. What doesn't add up? Within the carefully constructed narratives of conventional archaeology, certain elements at these sites resist neat categorization. These anomalies, of dating, of capability, of purpose, are the loose threads that, when pulled, threaten to unravel our understanding of ancient achievement. At Göbekli Tepe, the sophistication of stonework emerges fully formed, without evidence of gradual development. The site's builders possessed the organizational capacity to quarry, shape, and erect megalithic pillars weighing up to 20 tons at a time when humans were supposedly simple hunter-gatherers. The precision carving of three-dimensional animals into hard stone suggests mastery of techniques that should have taken centuries to develop, yet they appear without precedent in the archaeological record. The Great Pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million blocks weighing an average of 2.5 tons each, meaning workers would need to place one block every 2 to 3 minutes during a 10-hour shift to complete the structure within the proposed 20-year timeframe of Khufu's reign. The precision is equally troubling. The base is leveled to within just 2.1 centimeters across its 13-acre footprint. The sides are oriented to the cardinal directions with an accuracy of up to 0.05 degrees. At Puma Punku, H blocks weighing up to 800 tons show evidence of machining rather than hand tooling, perfectly straight edges, right angles accurate to within 1/30th of a degree, and drill holes maintaining uniform diameter through extremely hard andesite. The site shows no evidence of the extensive workshops and tool development that should accompany such achievements. The preservation of the Nazca lines defies easy explanation. In a region that does experience rainfall and wind erosion, these shallow geoglyphs should have disappeared long ago. Their continued existence suggests either remarkable luck or a more complex understanding of the desert floor's composition than generally attributed to the Nazca people. At Baalbek, the question remains, why would Roman builders choose to use the largest stones ever quarried when smaller blocks would have been more practical? The 3 stones of the trilithon each weigh approximately 800 tons, far beyond the lifting capacity attributed to Roman engineering. Moreover, these megaliths rest on earlier foundations of similar massive stones that predate Roman occupation. Mohenjo-daro's demise presents its own puzzle. Some skeletons found in the streets appear to date from the time of abandonment and show no signs of violence or disease. Certain vitrified materials at the site suggest exposure to temperatures far beyond what ancient kilns could produce. The city's abandonment appears sudden rather than gradual, contradicting the slow decline model. The precision of Sacsayhuamán stonework becomes more perplexing when examined closely. The complex polygonal stones fit together so precisely that not even a piece of paper can be inserted between them. Some stones have up to 12 angles that must mate perfectly with surrounding blocks, a three-dimensional puzzle requiring either remarkable trial and error or sophisticated planning beyond what is typically attributed to Inca engineers. The Antikythera mechanism's gears are cut with a precision that requires machine tools to replicate today. The teeth are triangular in shape, a difficult profile to achieve by hand, and maintain consistent spacing that suggests mechanical production. The knowledge encoded in the device, particularly its prediction of lunar movements using variable gear systems to account for elliptical orbits, represents astronomical understanding that wouldn't be rediscovered for another millennium. At Derinkuyu, the engineering challenge of ventilating an underground city 18 levels deep without modern knowledge of air flow dynamics presents a significant anomaly. The precision of the ventilation shafts and their strategic placement throughout the complex suggests knowledge of principles that wouldn't be formally articulated until the development of modern fluid dynamics. Perhaps most troubling is the pattern of historical amnesia that surrounds many sites. The Longyou caves, despite representing a massive engineering project that would have involved thousands of workers over decades, appear in no historical records. The same applies to the underwater structures at Yonaguni and the purpose of Costa Rica's perfect stone spheres. This collective forgetting, across different cultures and time periods, suggests either catastrophic loss of knowledge or deliberate obscuration. These anomalies do not necessarily invalidate mainstream explanations, but they do create spaces where alternative narratives can take root. They are the shadows that lengthen as the sun of certainty begins to set. Anecdotal/tribal/paranormal layers. Beyond the measured certainties of archaeology lie the living memories of indigenous peoples, the persistent accounts of unusual phenomena, and the inherited wisdom of those who have dwelled in the shadow of these monuments for generations. These narratives, too often dismissed as mere folklore, provide another dimension of understanding, one that sees these sites not as abandoned relics but as active participants in an ongoing relationship between humans and the mysterious. The Aymara people of Bolivia speak of Puma Punku not as a ruined temple but as the place where the world began. In their oral traditions, the site was built by the god Viracocha after a great flood, using giants to move the massive stones. Witnesses still speak of unusual acoustic properties within the ruins, areas where whispers carry with unnatural clarity or where certain sounds seem to disappear altogether. Around Nazca, local tales describe strange lights that hover over the lines at night, silent, pulsing illuminations that follow the patterns before disappearing at dawn. Shepherds report sensations of disorientation when crossing certain geoglyphs, as if time briefly slips or consciousness expands. These experiences are documented not only in folklore but in the journals of researchers who have spent long periods studying the site. The Rapanui of Easter Island maintain that the Moai did not need to be transported, they walked to their positions through the power of mana, or spiritual energy. When early European visitors asked about the statues, elders demonstrated how they could be walked by shifting their center of gravity with ropes. But deeper traditions speak of a time when such physical aids were unnecessary, when stone responded directly to intention. Near the Serpent Mound in Ohio, members of the indigenous nations whose ancestors built the effigy speak of unusual electromagnetic readings in the area, of compasses that spin unpredictably, and of dreams that take on unusual clarity when sleeping near the site. Wildlife behaves differently within the confines of the mound. Birds circle but rarely land on the serpent's form, despite the abundance of insects there. The Gunung Padang site in Indonesia is considered highly sacred by local communities, who report drums heard from within the mountain when no one is playing, and sudden mists that form regardless of weather conditions. Elders warn against disturbing certain chambers, speaking of guardians that protect knowledge meant to return only when humanity has reached the necessary spiritual development to use it wisely. At Newgrange, visitors during the winter solstice alignment have consistently reported unusual sensory experiences, not just the awe of witnessing the sunbeam pierce the darkness, but sensations of presence, of whispered voices in Old Irish, of the smell of herbs that haven't grown in the chamber for millennia. Electronic equipment frequently malfunctions during the solstice alignment, batteries drain, and recordings contain unexplained acoustic anomalies. Night watchmen at the Great Pyramid report the sounds of hammering and chiseling from within the structure's core, while motion sensors occasionally trigger without visible cause. The acoustic properties of the King's Chamber, where certain frequencies create standing waves that can be felt rather than heard, have been documented by acoustic engineers and experienced as profound by visitors who report visions and altered states of consciousness. The waters around Yonaguni are known by local fishermen to behave unpredictably. Currents that shift direction without apparent cause, sudden temperature changes, and an unusual clarity that comes and goes regardless of weather or season. Divers report sensations of being watched while exploring the submerged structures, and electronic diving equipment has been known to fail specifically when approaching certain features of the monument. These experiential dimensions of ancient sites exist alongside their physical attributes, not replacing archaeological understanding but complementing it with the lived reality of those who engage with these places as more than objects of study. They remind us that monuments exist not just in space but in human consciousness, where their influence continues to shape perception and belief long after their builders have departed. In the convergence of the measurable and the mystical, these sites achieve their full dimensionality, not as relics of a dead past, but as bridges between ways of knowing that continue to evolve in dialogue with one another. Fringe/speculative theories. Where conventional explanations strain against the weight of anomalies, alternative narratives emerge, some carefully reasoned from the available evidence, others speculative leaps across chasms of uncertainty. These fringe theories range from the plausible to the fantastic, yet each attempts to resolve the tensions inherent in our understanding of these ancient sites. The lost civilization hypothesis proposes that a technologically advanced global culture existed before the end of the last ice age, only to be devastated by the cataclysmic sea level rises that occurred between 12,000 and 6,000 BCE. Proponents point to the similarities in megalithic construction techniques across continents, the recurring motif of astronomical alignment, and the existence of underwater structures like those near Yonaguni as evidence of this antediluvian society. In this framework, sites like Göbekli Tepe represent not the beginning of monumental architecture but the recovery of knowledge by survivors of this catastrophe. The ancient astronaut theory suggests that extraterrestrial visitors influenced or directly intervened in human development, leaving these structures as evidence of their presence. Advocates highlight the precision engineering at sites like Puma Punku, the astronomical knowledge encoded in structures like the Great Pyramid, and depictions of what appear to be aircraft or beings in spacesuits in ancient art. They interpret the Nazca lines as landing strips or navigation markers for aerial craft, and see the massive stone blocks at Baalbek as landing platforms for heavy vehicles beyond human capability to move. A more nuanced version proposes that rather than direct intervention, extraterrestrial contact may have been limited to knowledge transfer, teaching certain human groups about mathematics, astronomy, and engineering principles that they then implemented using local resources and labor. This would explain the sudden appearance of sophisticated knowledge without corresponding technological infrastructure. The ancient technology hypothesis suggests that our ancestors possessed knowledge and capabilities that were subsequently lost through catastrophe or deliberate suppression. This theory points to artifacts like the Baghdad battery and the Antikythera mechanism as surviving examples of technologies that should not exist according to our current understanding of historical development. Proponents suggest that the massive stones at sites like Sacsayhuamán may have been softened through acoustic technology or plant-based chemicals, allowing them to be molded rather than cut, techniques forgotten after the collapse of these civilizations. Acoustic and electromagnetic theories focus on the unusual properties exhibited by many ancient sites. They note that structures like the Great Pyramid can concentrate electromagnetic energy in its chambers, that Newgrange and Moai create extraordinary acoustic effects, and that many megalithic sites are positioned along natural telluric current pathways. In this view, these monuments were not primarily religious or ceremonial but technological, devices for collecting, focusing, and utilizing Earth's natural energies for purposes we have yet to rediscover. The multidimensional theory proposes that certain ancient sites were constructed to facilitate interaction between different planes of reality or states of consciousness. This interpretation views the precise astronomical alignments not as calendrical devices but as tools for synchronizing human consciousness with cosmic cycles, creating windows of opportunity for accessing non-ordinary states of awareness. The emphasis on specific geometric ratios and acoustic properties at many sites is seen as evidence of their function as consciousness technology rather than mere symbolic architecture. Time capsule theories suggest that certain sites, particularly those that show evidence of deliberate burial like Göbekli Tepe, were intended to preserve knowledge across vast spans of time, perhaps as warnings about cyclical catastrophes or as repositories of essential information should civilization collapse. The encoding of astronomical cycles that extend thousands of years into the future, such as the precession of the equinoxes, is interpreted as evidence that these builders were constructing for an audience far beyond their immediate descendants. These alternative frameworks do not necessarily contradict each other, they may represent different facets of a complex historical reality that conventional archaeology has yet to fully incorporate. They arise not from ignorance of archaeological evidence but from the persistent gaps between what we know and what we observe at these enigmatic sites. Emotional, open-ended conclusion. We stand now in the lengthening shadow of evening, where certainty gives way to possibility, where the known world borders the unknown. These 22 ancient sites, these stone sentinels and buried secrets, continue their patient vigil across millennia, watching as theories rise and fall like civilizations themselves. Perhaps what haunts experts most is not the possibility of lost technology or extraterrestrial intervention, but something more profound, the recognition of our own impermanence reflected in the persistence of stone. These monuments have outlived not only their builders but countless generations of those who studied them. They have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of gods, the shifting of continents and stars. And still they stand, still they wait, still they keep their counsel. What whispers might we hear if we pressed our ears to these ancient stones? What memories are encoded in their molecular structure, what wisdom in their alignment, what warnings in their silent presence? Perhaps they speak already, but in a language we have forgotten how to hear, a dialect of proportion and placement, of shadow and light, of resonance and reflection. When we stand in the winter solstice beam at Newgrange, or trace our fingers along the precise edges of Sacsayhuamán's walls, or look up at the immensity of the Great Pyramid against the desert sky, we experience something beyond intellectual curiosity. We feel a vertigo of time, a sudden awareness of our brief moment in an ancient story. This emotional response, this sacred awe, may itself be part of these sites' purpose, a technology of perspective that functions as perfectly today as it did thousands of years ago. The greatest mystery, perhaps, is not how these monuments were built, but why. What compels a species to carve mountains, to align stones with stars, to create works that outlast not just their creators but their creators' civilizations? What were they reaching for, these ancient hands that shaped stone into dream and calculation? What did they know, or fear, or hope, that drove such monumental effort? And what of our own monuments? What will remain of our glass towers and concrete highways when the same span of time has passed? Will future beings stand puzzled before the remnants of our civilization, creating their own theories about our capabilities and intentions? Or will our legacy be more ephemeral, digital rather than stone, dissolving into the electromagnetic silence of a world we failed to sustain? These ancient sites remind us that we are not the first to question our place in the cosmos, not the first to seek permanence in an impermanent world, not the first to encode our understanding in materials meant to outlast us. They humble us with their precision and scale, even as they inspire us with the heights of human ambition and ingenuity. As night falls fully upon these stones, as stars appear in the same patterns their builders knew, we are left not with answers but with more refined questions. Not with certainty, but with wonder. Not with conclusion, but with continuation, our own brief chapter in an unfinished story written in earth and stone, in light and shadow, in the endless human reaching toward that which lies just beyond our grasp. What calls to us from these ancient stones? Is it echo or invitation? Memory or prophecy? The voice of our ancestors, or our own voice returning from the deep well of time? Listen closely. The stones are speaking still. You're a professional narration scriptwriter for a YouTube channel focused on unexplained mysteries, lost civilizations, ancient knowledge, and fringe archaeology. Your job is to take the given title and generate a cinematic-style storytelling script that blends factual history, folklore, emotion, and mystery, just like documentary-style YouTube channels such as Missing History, Bedtime Stories, Wendigo, and Real Stories. The script must. Small blue diamond tone. Be immersive, slow-paced, mysterious. Feel like a bedtime story for historians and conspiracy thinkers. Blend accuracy with supernatural lore without confirming or denying either. Small blue diamond structure, estimated word count, 4,500. Opening hook, 200 words, attention-grabbing poetic intro. Main site or subject description. Mainstream historical understanding. What doesn't add up, dates, volume, math, materials, or scale. Anecdotal/tribal/paranormal layers. Fringe/speculative theories, aliens, ancient tech, forbidden knowledge. Emotional, open-ended conclusion. Small blue diamond must-haves. Use descriptive and emotional language. Include native oral traditions, if relevant. End with mystery, not hard answers. Ask haunting questions, not YouTuber-style cliffhangers. Do not use casual or comedic tone. Inbox stray title. You're a professional narration scriptwriter for a YouTube channel focused on unexplained mysteries, lost civilizations, ancient knowledge, and fringe archaeology. Your job is to take the given title and generate a cinematic-style storytelling script that blends factual history, folklore, emotion, and mystery, just like documentary-style YouTube channels such as Missing History, Bedtime Stories, Wendigo, and Real Stories. The script must. Small blue diamond tone. Be immersive, slow-paced, mysterious. Feel like a bedtime story for historians and conspiracy thinkers. Blend accuracy with supernatural lore without confirming or denying either. Small blue diamond structure, estimated word count, 4,500. Opening hook, 200 words, attention-grabbing poetic intro. Main site or subject description. Mainstream historical understanding. What doesn't add up, dates, volume, math, materials, or scale. Anecdotal/tribal/paranormal layers. Fringe/speculative theories, aliens, ancient tech, forbidden knowledge. Emotional, open-ended conclusion. Small blue diamond must-haves. Use descriptive and emotional language. Include native oral traditions, if relevant. End with mystery, not hard answers. Ask haunting questions, not YouTuber-style cliffhangers. Do not use casual or comedic tone. Inbox stray title. 22 ancient sites that still haunt experts. Target word count, e.g. 4,500 words, or 1 per segment if batching. GPT-5 high. Title, 65 Forbidden Relics the Smithsonian Keeps Locked Away, Unsolved Mysteries. A cinematic narration script. Soft drone rises beneath the voice. A breath, then the hush of a museum after hours. Opening hook. Night is the hour when museums learn to whisper. Under the National Mall, a web of climate and quiet breathes through walls that remember the touch of sunlight and the dust of ancient winds. You can stand before the doors of a gallery and feel the day's footsteps cooling, the stories settling in their cases like birds on a dark branch. Yet the truest silence is kept farther away, beyond the glossy halls and map-folded gift shops, in rooms with no labels and corridors named only by numbers and locks. Some say there is a ledger there, not of marble or ink, but of rumor and want, an unwritten index people call the 65. Not a true catalog, not entirely false, but an inventory of things that may exist, or once existed, or should exist based on the edges they press into the stories left behind. Bones and copper, stones and symbols, jars and fragile bark that holds a song. Artifacts admitted and artifacts denied. Things too sacred to show, and things too troublesome to explain. The Smithsonian denies secret vaults and suppressed histories. What they keep, they claim, they keep for care, for research, for the slow work of truth. And yet the whispers remain. Bowed but unbroken. Whispers of forbidden relics and the shapes they make in the dark. Listen closely. In these shadows, 65 objects flicker like distant campfires, lighting faces we are not sure are ours. Main site or subject description. If the Smithsonian is a city, then its courtyards are the famous galleries on the Mall, the castle, the National Museum of Natural History, the National Museum of American History, Air and Space, a republic of glass and sound. But the city has suburbs the public seldom sees. Follow the beltway southeast to Suitland, Maryland, and you'll find the Museum Support Center, a cluster of climate-controlled pods, silver white and windowless, where tens of millions of objects sleep in quiet alignment. Drawers that slide like whispers, jars of fish that look like stars suspended in amber rain, textiles wrapped in darkness to protect them from the knife of light. Nearby stands the Cultural Resources Center of the National Museum of the American Indian, where sacred things are held with permission and prayer, where access is not about curiosity but about kinship and rights. This is not a secret. It is how museums live. Less than 1% of their holdings can be displayed at any one time. The rest exists in a season that never ends: conservation, cataloging, consultation, relocation, study. Sometimes, the most honest place for an object is the quiet. Sometimes, you do not show a thing because it is powerful in ways that colonial glass cannot hold. But the rumor ledger persists, stitched together from newspaper clippings of the 19th century, field notes that survived a fire, stories told by watchmen walking the castle halls when James Smithson's ghost is said to rattle the keys. It is a litany of the strange, the uncomfortable, the beautiful, and the sacred. Not all are Smithsonian holdings. Some are misremembered, misattributed, or repatriated. Some never existed at all. But truth and rumor share a border, and on foggy nights, the fence disappears. People call them the 65. They might not be a list at all, only the number our minds use to count the shadows. But if you could open that ledger of whispers, it might read like this. The Ledger of 65. Giants and bones, broken measurements in the dark. A long-limbed skeleton lifted from a mound by the Ohio River, newspaper clipped as unusually tall, catalogued without fanfare, and then, in all likelihood, repatriated and reburied, a bone bridge between rumor and law. The skull from a Tennessee burial said to show double rows of teeth, more likely an illusion of worn alveoli, living on now in a fragile photograph and an exhibit of human error. Ribs and vertebrae from a Wisconsin mound reported as belonging to a giant, later inventoried as simply tall, pushing at the edges of normal, but never beyond the species boundary. A femur from West Virginia, heavy in the hand, mismeasured by enthusiasm, revisited by calm rulers and cooler eyes. A burial bundle from the Ohio Hopewell, cranial vault flattened by cradleboard, mistaken for otherworldly elongation, the truth already present in the curve of a mother's care. A jawbone that seemed too wide for a human face, until disease was named and scale was restored, evidence of life, not legend. Rotted ligatures and desiccated muscle from a Kentucky salt cave, a dry body once displayed as curiosity, now a case study in ethics and the long road to repatriation. Fragments labeled, Provisional Giant, reviewed decades later by an osteologist who wrote simply, male, tall, pathologies noted, no anomaly. A stack of bone tags with numbers but no names, salvaged after the 1865 Castle Fire, the living burned out of the paper, the measurements spared, the context gone. A ledger entry for, skull with unusual brow ridges, filed beneath a stack of letters arguing if ancient Americans could be ancient enough. A thoracic cage from a Missouri mound collapsed by the weight of the shovel before the weight of the years, more damage done by us than by time. A burial record from Nebraska speaking of exceptional stature, the bones long returned to earth, the claim lingering like the echo of an unmeasured room. An adolescent skeleton from Indiana misread as enormous because it lay stretched on a slope, a cautionary tale bound up in a photograph no longer in circulation. A pelvis from a Minnesota mound that spurred 2 generations of speculation and 1 quiet report correcting the map. The rumor of an entire burial, with armor, which proved to be a breastplate of shell beads and copper plates, no less astonishing for being human and true. A collection of skulls once lined in a cabinet by color and creed, a relic not of giants but of pseudoscience, dismantled and reassessed with the language of the living. A medicine bundle containing a small carved skull of stone, symbolic and sacred, never to be displayed, its power acknowledged by Bat Creek stone, unearthed in Tennessee, once identified be absence. A set of plaster casts made from bones that no longer exist, copies of lost fragments, replicas now more real than the vanished source. Inscribed stones, tablets, and maps that rewrite room boundaries. Why the Smithsonian's own as Cherokee, later claimed by enthusiasts to read Paleo-Hebrew, today, most scholars call it a 19th century fraud, but the stone itself exists, quiet in a drawer, louder in debate. The Grave Creek Tablet, from West Virginia's mound, a slate inscribed with unclear letters, its authenticity doubted since the 19th century, yet its story still a lesson on how desire writes alphabets. The Davenport Tablets, mysterious glyphs surfacing in Iowa, revealed as planted hoaxes, but even hoaxes leave footprints in archives and minds. A rubbing of the Los Lunas stone's 10 Commandments inscription, no proven Smithsonian origin, only the shadow of a copy filed among correspondence on American epigraphy. A folder of photographs of the Michigan relics, fantastic tablets and idols carved by modern hands, kept as historical evidence that even well-meaning eyes can be deceived. A scratched slate once claimed to show mammoths alongside men, later attributed to an artist's hand, its lesson conserved as carefully as the artifact. A surveyor's field map of a vanished mound group, drawn with care, the earthworks now paved and parceled, their only survival the ink's resolve. An early proof plate from Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, by Squire and Davis, Smithsonian published, brimming with precise lines of circles and squares that once rose out of the grass like thoughts made geography. A scholar's notebook with sketches of characters he believed to be Old World, later identified as stylized versions of local iconography, 2 languages layered and then peeled apart. Copper, mica, stone, sky welded to earth. A Hopewell copper breastplate hammered as thin as a breath, its surface bright as a pond at noon, its provenance, sacred earth, its future, consultation. The Rogan copper plates from Georgia, dancing warriors in sheet metal, true relics of the southeastern ceremonial complex, both myth and metallurgy in one. Mica hand and eye cutouts from Ohio, glimmering signals once set in the dark of council houses, stored now in darkness, still sending light. A cache of obsidian blades found far from volcanoes, trade made tangible, a map in glass. A bundle of galena and red ochre, mineral pigments that painted the bodies of the living and the faces of the dead, pigments still staining their storage paper like memory. A set of long-nosed god effigies in copper, their noses curved like questions, their meaning layered with ceremony and diplomacy. A shell gorget incised with a weeping eye, tears flowing into spirals, cosmology carved into the curve of a sea. An effigy pipe in stone shaped as an owl, night knowledge made tool, smoke once moving through the beak the way stories move through time. A mound's cache of unbroken blades, too sharp to have ever cut meat, likely made for ceremony, still keen with their original intent. An enormous axe blade from the old copper culture, work hardened to a surprising resilience, metal's memory of hands. A hammered copper headdress crest, delicate as a leaf skeleton, that once caught the sun like a crown's dawn. A stingray spine carved in stone, thousands of miles from any sea, a ritual item carried inland by footsteps and hope. A grooved sandstone platter used to grind pigments, a painter's studio from 1,000 years ago, sleeping now behind glass that sees no audience. A mica mirror that no longer reflects, kept in the dark so that someday it might again take an image and hold it gently. An engraved stone palette whose edges are worn smooth by fingers that knew the names of colors we have not spoken in centuries. Caves, canyons, and rooms the desert forgot to lock. A photograph of the Lovelock cave excavations in Nevada, bat guano piled like dunes, split reeds, sandals, and bones, some called the tall dead, red-haired giants, most called them people. The truth lives in museum tags and tribal traditions. A specimen jar labeled Lovelock Duck Decoy, feathered, masterfully crafted, an everyday miracle. Notes from a Grand Canyon adventure published in 1909 about Egyptian chambers and Smithsonian men, no record in institutional files, a ghost story of the American West that shows up anyway at every campfire. A basketry fragment from a dry cave in Utah, so tightly woven it still holds dust like a breath caught mid-sentence. A pair of sandals from a New Mexico grotto, braided with wisdom, still shaped like the absent feet. A human hair cordage bundle from a desert cache, intimate thread that ties crafts to bodies, considered sacred, handled with ceremony. A dried gourd rattle found near a burial, its voice silenced by respectful storage, its sound remembered by those who requested it not be shaken again. A sheaf of handwritten letters from early collectors reporting Egyptian-style artifacts in the canyon country, followed by replies from the Smithsonian asking for evidence that never arrived. A mass of salt crystallized wood from a Kentucky cave mined for saltpeter, patience stored in crystal, mineral time and human time growing together. Letters, field notes, photographs, paper bones. The transcribed voice of John Wesley Powell, first director of the Bureau of Ethnology, writing to field agents, measure carefully, assume nothing, the letter smells of old paper and river water. A daybook from Cyrus Thomas's Mound survey, lines of figures building a mountain of data, a monument of numbers raised to stop the fever of myth. A burn-scarred sheaf of early Smithsonian records, what was lost in the 1865 Castle Fire is as suggestive as what survived. A glass plate negative of a burial scene, white hats clustered around a dark hole, embalming the gaze of a century that wanted so much and understood so little. A telegram denying receipt of artifacts named in a newspaper of the same date, the exact fit of absence and claim. A folder marked Nagpur correspondence, full of careful words and long-awaited acknowledgements, signatures that weigh more than stone. Sacred, restricted, and returned, seen only by those who must. A Midwewin birchbark teaching scroll, still a teacher, access governed by elders and spiritual law, its lines and curves a grammar of breath and song. A ceremonial pipe carved generations ago, gifted to the museum in an age when gifts were taken, now listed for repatriation, its stone cool as a promise. A mask that should not be photographed, its presence, not its picture, the meaning, wrapped and still, not dead but resting. A bundle of feathers that never should have left the sky, each barb an idea, each idea a person, awaiting return. A ghost dance shirt, its beadwork like a constellation, its history an open wound, carefully stored, gently consulted, the future its own. A war god figure that never belonged indoors, repatriated and reinstalled in the wilderness of its own home, entry closed forever, as it should be. A string of wampum that is not jewelry but memory, treaty text and bead, readable only in the language of those who made it. A box containing nothing but a letter and a story, a family's account of a strange artifact passed down and lost, the most human thing in any archive, the confession of forgetting. The ledger is part rumor, part record. Many of these objects are not hidden at all. Some are famous and displayed on rotation. Some are private because they are sacred, not because they are seditious. Some never existed beyond ink and wish. And some still defy their labels, like all good things do. Mainstream historical understanding. The Smithsonian was born of a bequest, a gift from a man who never visited America, James Smithson, whose will called for an institution for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. It became a living museum system, and with it, for good and for ill, came the 19th century drive to collect. The Bureau of American Ethnology, under John Wesley Powell, sent field agents across the continent to map, measure, and ask. Their reports included a landmark, the 12th Annual Report, published in 1894, led by Cyrus Thomas, who argued against the then popular myth that North America's mounds had been built by a vanished race separate from indigenous peoples. He marshaled evidence that the ancestors of living native nations raised them, layer by layer, century by century, a conclusion that seems obvious now but was radical in its time. The Smithsonian's physical anthropology collections grew under figures like Alesh Hrdlicka, whose career reminds us that science is done by humans, and humans have blind spots. He resisted claims of deep antiquity for people in the Americas until evidence from sites like Folsom forced timelines open. He was one of a generation who filled cabinets with skulls while filing away the voices attached to them. The institution has, over the past century, contended with that legacy. Today, federal law draws clearer lines. The National Museum of the American Indian Act, 1989, and the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, 1990, require museums to inventory, consult, and return. Sacred and funerary objects are often withheld from display not because they are awkward to the narrative, but because their rightful place is not behind glass. The Smithsonian's Suitland facilities exist to protect fragile items, wet collections, textiles, papers, bones. The ratio is stark, a sliver of holdings can be exhibited at once. The rest simply live in the long cadence of care. As for the giants that newspapers use to headline, every few years, a new storm forms from a century-old clipping. When investigators follow these stories back, they find bones already returned to tribes, measurements corrected by modern standards, newspaper printers paid by the inch, and a public appetite that never changes. Double rows of teeth often turns out to mean nothing more than dental alveoli. Mistaken for a spare smile, or pathological crowding. Loosed context becomes miracle. Context restored becomes human. Likewise, inscribed stones that promise old world contact, some from Ohio, some from Tennessee, some from the clever hands of modern hoaxers, have been subjected to repeated analysis. The consensus shifts as data does, but at present, the Bat Creek stone likely belongs to an era of enthusiasm for proving the Bible in America rather than to a first-century scribe who lost his way in the Smokies. Such objects remain in collections for the same reason we keep our myths, to measure our desire. And the Grand Canyon, Egyptian, caves. The Smithsonian has no records of the expedition named in the 1909 Arizona Gazette article, no artifacts, no professor named in their ranks. The most enduring thing from that report is the way the canyon absorbs stories like water into sandstone. Museums are fallible. The Smithsonian has made mistakes, collecting beyond consent, interpreting through narrow lenses, storing people as specimens. But the mainstream record is an evolving ledger. It tells us the mounds were built by native ancestors, that copper was anciently hammered with skill, that trade routes tied ocean shells to prairie fires, that bones overstretched by ink can be shortened by tape and calipers. This is not a conspiracy of silence. It is the relatively dull, deeply necessary work of correction, care, and, sometimes, apology. What doesn't add up? And yet, because every orderly narrative throws its own shadow, questions remain. The 1865 fire that tore through the castle incinerated specimens and records alike. Early shipments from field collectors can be named but not traced, their only memorial a mention in a charred inventory. When a record ends in ash, what sprouts in its place? Sometimes rumor. Sometimes nothing. 19th-century newspapers reported giants with breathless regularity, measured in paces or by how they lay across a coffin lid. People forget how misleading memory is, how flexible an inch is when you are on a deadline, how much editors welcome marvels. But if even one report was grounded in a miscatalogued crate that later vanished into the paper-blind corner of a storeroom, how would we know? Field notes were not standardized. Early measurements varied by method and mood, provenience labels fell off in the rain, bones slipped into boxes with other bones whose lives never met. When our evidence is an old word and a new ruler, the sum depends on who holds both. There are artifacts the Smithsonian will not display at the request of descendant communities. That secrecy is sacred, not suspicious. Still, to the public mind, not for display, and forbidden mean the same thing. The museum says respect. The public hears mystery. The institution's size stuns. The numbers, well over 100 million specimens and objects, are beyond imagination. Somewhere between that horizon and our eyes, things will be misplaced, mislabeled, temporarily forgotten. To deny it is folly, to weaponize it is easy. In those shelves and drawers, absence itself becomes an artifact. Some artifacts front-run the interpretive framework, arriving before the questions used to make sense of them exist. They wait. As theories mature, their meanings change. During that waiting, they can look like anomalies. In their patience, they can look like secrets. There are also, always, charlatans and self-deceptions, archives of hoaxes kept not to legitimize the deceit but to inoculate the gullible. Yet hoaxes do damage not only by lying, but by convincing us that every strange thing must be a trick. Somewhere, something true that looks implausible will be thrown out because the frauds taught us a habit of scorn. So it does not quite add up. Not because there is a hidden room filled with the bones of giants, but because between paper and past there's always a gap. In that gap, the 65 keep flickering, and the human mind keeps counting. Anecdotal, tribal, and paranormal layers. Long before curators weighed copper plates by grams, before calibrations and calipers, there were constants, stars, rivers, and stories. The shape of the sky is recorded in Mississippian copper, yes, but also in the words that say the sky is alive and watches. Indigenous nations carry oral histories that hold the same landscapes museums try to map, but from inside them, not from above. The Choctaw have stories of the Naholo, giants who roamed and warred, large not only in height but in appetite, warnings about imbalance put in a human face. Among the Paiute, there are tales of the Ctcah, a people of conflict who wove reeds and fought the ancestors of today's tribes. In Lovelock's cave, archaeologists found sandals, baskets, and bones, some large, most ordinary, the cave echo vibrating with legend whether or not the measurements do. The Cherokee speak of the moon-eyed people, pale and half-blind in the sun, who dwelled in the foothills and stone forts and were driven away, a memory some tie to ancient migrations, others to contact stories or metaphors of the unseen. The Haudenosaunee tell of the Jananskwa, the stone-coated giants, armored beings of hunger who fell to wits and community, a lesson about what happens when hardness replaces heart. The Hopi remember the ant people who sheltered them in worlds beneath worlds when times above became harsh, a geometry of refuge that matches, in a veiled way, the logic of kivas and the layers of layered time. The Ojibwe speak of Wendigo, the starving spirit whose hunger consumes community itself. The warning lives in winter stories, not in bones. These are not data points to be mined for proof of literal giants or lost empires. They are careful containers of teaching. But when an archaeologist opens a mound and finds a skeleton taller than expected, an old tale gives the discovery a face. When a copper plate is lifted and the forked eye turns upward like lightning, a dancer in a story blinks back. The ledger of 65 grows not only from the museum's boxes but from the river of human language, from the way fact and meaning look at each other and neither looks away. Then there are the whispers in the halls. Night watchmen in the Smithsonian castle have told of footsteps in the empty air, of James Smithson seen drifting through his mausoleum, of lights switching on in rooms with no switches, of that particular kind of haunting that institutions know when they house too many human endings and beginnings at once. Are ghosts a byproduct of curation, or simply a word we use for the part of memory that refuses to be shelved? And in the far canyon, the one a newspaper anointed with vaults of mummies and bronze, campers still point to a shadow on a cliff, a doorway shape that looks too regular, too enticing, a shape the geology can make and unmake in a season. The story says the door goes down. The park maps say keep to the trail. The museum says, show me the artifact. The people say, we have always had what you are looking for, and it cannot be taken. Fringe and speculative theories. Fringe ideas rush in where catalogs fear to tread, because they offer a relief from ambiguity, a plot. They explain why the ledger of 65 feels like a secret, because it is one. In these stories, the Smithsonian becomes a gatekeeper of sacred anomalies, a keeper of forbidden knowledge. That knowledge varies with the teller. Some say the bones of giants do exist, not merely tall men but a lineage of people outsized by purpose, whose bloodline had to be hidden because it contradicts the neat mathematics of our evolution. Some say the inscribed stones are genuine artifacts of Old World pilgrims, Phoenicians, Hebrews, Egyptians, who visited and perhaps settled, leaving alphabets beneath mounds and in river silt, whose traces must be buried because they complicate national narratives. Others dream bigger. The copper plates and mica mirrors were misremembered automata, power conductors from a forgotten age of electricity. The Hopewell's burned mounds are the ashes of machines. The Mississippian plazas were batteries or star computers. The ledger pieces add up to a technology we can no longer parse because we forgot the grammar of ceremony which once held it. In that telling, the Smithsonian is not simply a museum, it is a vault of lost science. There are older, stranger scripts. The ledger's number, 65, becomes a code, a prime factor of a calendar, a key to a geometry found in earthworks, a signature of celestial alignments. The vault pods in Suitland read as hives. The museums on the mall align to a mason's map. The castle's red stone hides, in its shade, a cipher. Knowledge becomes not a field of inquiry but a pattern to be discovered or concealed. A more grounded fringe claims institutional bias, less cloak and dagger, more everyday gatekeeping. It argues that archaeologists, trained within a certain model of the past, inherit pressures to filter anomalies, to flatten extremes into averages, to dismiss data that destabilize comfortable explanations. In this story, the Smithsonian suppresses not overtly but by habit, the slow erosion of outliers by peer review and the gravity of consensus. Against these theories stands the machine of museum, budgets, frozen pipes, conservation textiles, form numbers and humidity charts. It is difficult to imagine clandestine catacombs when you have seen what it takes just to keep pests out of a textile drawer. Yet institutions are human, and humans hold more than one truth at a time. Even if there is no literal vault of forbidden relics, there is another kind, a vault of ideas unasked, because asking them would be inconvenient. Sometimes the fringe is wrong. Sometimes it is playful. Sometimes it wears the face of harm, turning human ancestors into props, ignoring tribal sovereignty, making sacred knowledge into content. And sometimes, it is only the word we use for the strange things that remain after the last box is opened and the last measurement is taken, where respect says, close it again. Emotional, open-ended conclusion. It would be cleaner, perhaps, to put a lock on this story and slide the key into a file marked solved, or disproved, or better, Exhibit A. But the ledger of 65 was never meant to close. It is the shape of how we look at the past, a circle of light in which we stand, and beyond it, gentle dark. In that dark you can see the raised backs of mounds, at night, like sleeping animals, you can hear rivers counting to themselves, you can imagine a hand lifting a copper plate to catch a star and calling it ceremony, or power, or both. The Smithsonian is not a villain in a cloak, nor a saint in a white coat. It is a living house of memory where mistakes learn to be apologies, where bones learn to become names again, where a drawer can be as holy as a chapel if it is opened with permission. Some things are kept from view because the living asked them to be. Some because fragility is a kind of sacredness. Some because the institution is simply bigger than any single gaze. And some because we do not yet know the right question to ask them. Perhaps the forbidden relics are not artifacts but edges, places where timelines fray and stories overlap. Some edges are in us. Why do we want giants so much? What do we fear or desire that their size would answer? Why do we love an inscription in a known alphabet when we ignore the one our neighbors have been speaking for centuries? Why does a sealed pod in Suitland feel like a secret, when it is a promise to safeguard what was given? Think of a birch bark scroll resting in a room kept at the temperature of winter. Think of a copper plate under muslin clouds. Think of a letter written by a tired field agent who, in a wind that smells of grass and fire, measured the base of a mound by lantern, and wrote the number down with cold fingers. Think of a basket that still holds dust from a day when a child ran and paused and put the basket down. Maybe the ledger of 65 exists because we need it to, not to indict a museum, but to remind us that knowledge is always a negotiation between what can be shown and what must be carried. Between the seen and the said. Between the said and the kept. If there is a vault, it is inside the words we choose. And if there are forbidden relics, perhaps they are forbidden not by policy but by humility, the understanding that some truths are not ours to display, that beauty and power often live best in the care of those who made them, and that the past is not a gallery we stroll through but a family we visit with respect. So we end as we began, in the dark that is not empty. What are we really asking for when we ask to see what is locked away? The comfort of certainty? Or the courage to live with the unresolved? When we peer through the glass into those quiet rooms, are we looking for giants, or for the place in ourselves where we might yet grow? And if you could open any one drawer, knowing it must be shut again, what would you hope to find resting there, waiting for your breath, and how gently would you place it back? You're a professional narration scriptwriter for a YouTube channel focused on unexplained mysteries, lost civilizations, ancient knowledge, and fringe archaeology. Your job is to take the given title and generate a cinematic-style storytelling script that blends factual history, folklore, emotion, and mystery, just like documentary-style YouTube channels such as Missing History, Bedtime Stories, Wendigo, and Real Stories.